Director of the IoT M2M Council, or IMC. And it's my pleasure to welcome you all to track one within our IoT Days Fall event presented by the IMC. Certainly hope everyone is staying safe and well. The topic for this track is extended detection and response for IoT security. We'll have a keynote introducing a new initiative from the IMC regarding IoT security. That'll last about 10 minutes. And that'll be followed by a panel of 45 minutes or so on extended detection and response. The two subjects fit well together, and I'm sure there'll be plenty of cross themes to be discussed. And also, I'd like to let you know that you should be sure to also join the IMC at the end of this session for a panel discussion on software bill of materials for IoT security. It's another very related subject, obviously. Before we begin, I also wanted to cover a few housekeeping items. This webcast is being streamed through your computer, so there is no dial-in number. For the best audio quality, please make sure your computer speakers or your headset are turned on and the volume is up so you can hear the presenters. An on-demand version of this webcast will be made available later today and can be accessed using the same audience link sent to you earlier. If you have any questions during the webcast, you can submit them through the Q&A box on the right side of your screen. The presenters may answer questions at the end of each session, but please feel free to ask your questions at any time during the presentations. I really encourage you to do this. As soon as you've got a question, please submit it. And if we don't get to your question, it will be responded to offline. The presenters will have a record of who's asked questions, and they will get back to you. For those of you that do not know the IMC, perhaps just a quick word of introduction. The IMC is the largest trade organization dedicated to the global IoT sector. Its membership is comprised of 28,000 rank and file adopter members who are individual enterprise users, product makers, including OEMs and apps developers that all deploy IoT solutions. They join the IMC for our content, which in addition to events like these includes conference program for live events. We're the exclusive IoT partner for CES and Embedded World, as well as providing our adopters with use cases, white papers, newsletters, and blogs. We maintain the most extensive online library of IoT content that we know of. IMC adopters have to qualify for membership as IoT deployers. The IMC's board of governors includes about 35 of the most influential IoT technology companies that provide solutions in the form of hardware, software, and connectivity. They join the IMC for access to our adopters for purposes of thought leadership, lead generation, promotion, and research. We encourage anyone attending today to check out our website at iotm2mcouncil.org. And now it's my pleasure to introduce a good friend, Syed Hossain, who is one of the founders and an IoT evangelist at Eris, one of the largest and most influential MVNOs providing IoT connectivity. Z, we call him fondly, also happens to be an IMC chairman emeritus. And we're fond of saying that Z Hossain has forgotten more about the IoT than the rest of us know. Z, good morning.
Hi, Keith. Thank you very much. Good morning and good afternoon to whoever might be in European markets, for example, dialing in. Thank you.
Please take us away, Z.
Appreciate that. As Keith mentioned, we are going to be talking in this keynote about a new initiative that the IMC has put together for a set of guidelines, which I'll go into a little bit more detail in the context of a few minutes over here. If you need more information, obviously, please feel free to contact us. You'll see contact info at the end of the deck, and obviously you can download a copy of the PDF that will give you that information as well. So let me go ahead and get started. And of course, the important point about IoT security, which is that it's a big deal. And this was a recent report published by Forrester Research. They surveyed many enterprises, I think almost 500 enterprises for this report that had a security breach. And they asked them basically what kind of things in your environment were the target of the attackers. And what was clear is that IoT devices has become the new target. They are attacking IoT because it is a place that people aren't necessarily watching out for security concerns. And that's what the purposes of our guidelines initiative is. Plus, and this is a very important point, there has been a massive growth in the number of IoT devices, as you have seen from probably from many analysts, we're looking at billions of devices scattered around the world and increasing rapidly. And the access to those devices, if you have an attacker who wants to get through and use them as a attack vector, is a big deal. And increasingly, IoT is becoming critical to business processes, and therefore, if you have a problem that is created by a attack on those IoT devices, is going to be a big deal. And finally, and most importantly, and within the last few months to a year or two, you've started seeing a number of new security regulations that are directed towards IoT devices. I'm not going to go into much detail about that, simply because we do not really have time in this presentation. But at some point in the near future, if you're interested in more information, we can provide that either through us or some of the other IMC board members have put together reports on what kind of security regulations are coming down the pike. Now, the first question that people tend to ask is, why should the IMC be doing this security guidelines initiative? And the answer is really straightforward. We're the largest professional organization, as Keith mentioned, dedicated to the global IoT sector. We have board members who are experienced in all three layers of the IoT stack, whether it's the devices, the modules, the gateways, the components that go into those devices, the network, companies like ours that provide the connectivity services, whether it's through cellular, like we do it, or through satellite services, as you'll hear from one of the panel members a little bit later on, and as well as the massive growth in low power technologies. You're starting to see devices, network, and then, of course, finally, the cloud app experience over there, where the management of the devices, the network management, again, places that we do our work in as well for our customers, enterprise customers. We have to watch out for all three layers. We have experience in all three layers. And as Keith mentioned, we have adopter members who are in all vertical markets. We can get that information to them. They're deploying IoT applications, 28,000 buyers buying IoT technology, and therefore things we learn can be propagated very quickly. We have shared learnings that we expect to have in these guidelines, and we will provide them to our members as well as to the public at large. So we initiated the Security Guidelines Project earlier this year, and the idea is very simple. We want to put together some practical guidelines for IoT security. In the past, people have not necessarily put together secure devices, secure network solutions in the IoT space, and we want to be very careful that we don't become a target vector that causes significant problems beyond the domain of the IoT markets themselves and the IoT solutions that are being deployed. More importantly, if you look at the regulations that are coming into force, we want to be careful about how those regulations apply to the companies that are deploying these IoT solutions. And we want to influence them, we want to guide them, and make sure that the regulations are practical, they are technically feasible, etc. So the purpose of this project is to create what I will hesitate to call a living document, but certainly that one evolves over time. It may not necessarily be a physical document. It may be a set of guidelines on a website. Those are still activity that we are working on today. The scope of the project is to collect all of the vendor neutral input that is available on IoT security, get the best practices from all of the people who are deploying IoT solutions, who have experience doing IoT solutions. We've been in the business for more than 28 years at this point, and so we have ideas that we can help with customers. Now, it is important to keep in mind that the IoT is not a standards body, so we don't intend to create any standards. IoT is far too complex, and there are too many standards in multi-vertical markets where the requirements may be a little bit different in every case. What we intend to do is basically link to and point towards those standards and efforts that are going on in the security world. The project is being overseen by the IMC board, the representative Ellen Bain. She's our vice chair. She will be overseeing the project, and there are three groups, as noted earlier, in the areas of devices and products, headed up by Harold Remmert. He's the CTO of DG International. Connectivity and networks, which I am chairing, the effort to get the information and best practices identified and talked about. And of course, cloud and applications, the IoT solution itself, if you will, being chaired by Fred Yentz. He's the CEO of Tartabit, and that company is going to, Fred's going to basically provide all of the collective knowledge gathering in that area itself. So that's what the security guidelines project is all about, so to speak. Now, what we decided early on was to make sure that in the approach that we took and the consensus we achieved with the board of the IMC was that we would make sure that these guidelines would be comprehensive. We would allow for a range of applications, whether it was consumer IoT applications, industrial IoT applications, um, point of the proof of concept to mass deployment, range of technologies, whether it was wired, wireless, satellite, all kinds of bandwidth in the IoT applications, et cetera, and gather the shared learnings. We want to make it practical. We want to get advice from the experts that deploy the IoT solutions. This is one of those scenarios where security is such a big deal that everyone who contributes is going to be furthering the expectations of IoT solutions in general. We do not want to be process oriented. We want to have hands-on best practices in there. And again, as I mentioned earlier, we want to reference existing work. We're not a standards body, whether you look at the NIST framework or you looked at the regulations that are coming along. We want to point to all of that work that is being done over there, get the recommendations from those industry bodies, have specific vertical market requirements that are identified, but not put together any kind of standard by any stretch of the imagination. And I'll remind everybody, this is not a once and done kind of effort. Security is a very, very regular task. You have issues that are associated with design and deployment. You want to implement the best practices as best as you know it. When you get out there with the IoT application, you want to monitor and detect any kind of breaches that have occurred during the life cycle of that solution, literally until the point of decommissioning a given device or a given isolation, a given end of life for a given product until decommission and removal of that device, and then isolate and remediate. If you do end up with breach devices, make sure that you can implement the fix. And very, very importantly, rinse and repeat. This is not going to be a once and done task. It has to be an ongoing process. We expect the guidelines to evolve over time, and we expect to make changes and improvements as we see new learnings that come along. Finally, I do want to put in a plug for a new capability that we've been working on for more than 10 or 12, almost 15 years, perhaps at this point. We've been using machine learning techniques to learn about what can happen in the network with regards to breaches. We've been using network metadata to provide that as a capability for ourselves, our own network monitoring, and we're now making that capability available externally. So we have come together internally here at ARIS to put together a solution for our enterprise customers. We calling it ARIS IoT Watchtower. You're sort of hearing the first about it right now. We'll be providing more information later in the year. And the motivation was very simple. We wanted to make sure that the security stacks that are not necessarily open to the cellular solutions that companies like ours provides, the traffic is hidden in many cases, that we can monitor that traffic. Since we have a core network, we can monitor that traffic and get that information and provide a solution that works very well. The traditional techniques in the network for encryption, for VPNs and private APNs do work, but they're insufficient for the kinds of IoT network traffic solutions that can be impacted by security attacks. And of course, devices can have agents, but they don't always work necessarily. If the endpoint of a device connection isn't ending up in your cloud, in your application, in your server, then you won't see it. So we expect to have some benefits here. If you look at the regulations that are coming along, they're talking about audits. We expect to be able to provide documentation, meet those compliance requirements, minimize the attack surface by protecting against the typical vulnerabilities that you might see in an IoT, and of course, remediate faster, because you get knowledge early in the day when you have lots of IoT devices deployed. That makes it very much easier to provide a solution that works for everybody. My last slide is contact information for the people that you can reach out to. Keith, as mentioned, that is his email address at the IMC. Ellen Bain, myself, Harold, and Fred. These are the companies that we're gathering information from. They're the board members of the IMC, and obviously anybody is welcome to participate. We've had some sessions earlier this year where we got input from people, and we want to continue this effort and make sure that we have a set of guidelines that are useful to the industry as a whole. Keith, I'm going to hand it back to you.
Great stuff, Z. Thank you for that. And just to reiterate, anyone who's interested in IoT security at any level, we'd like to talk to you. We intend to have further open sessions where we'll be discussing the guidelines we're developing, and we encourage folks to participate in that. Thanks, E.
Thank you very much, Keith.
With that, I would like to introduce Ellen Boehm, who is our IMC Vice Chairman, but also she happens to be the Senior Vice President of IoT Strategy and Operations at Keyfactor, a provider of public key infrastructure and other security technology. Ellen's responsible for go-to-market strategy at the company, as well as digital identity security solutions. Ellen, good morning.
Good morning. How are you, Keith?
Fine, thanks. Take us away.
Thank you. All right, thanks everyone. So this next session is going to be about 40 minutes or so. We've got a panel of experts here who are going to talk us through what is XDR, what do we need to know about it, how can we implement some of these practices into our businesses. So we've got a couple slides just to introduce who we are, what our companies do, but then this is mostly a discussion. So please, if you have questions, put them in the Q&A section of the interface here, and we will get to them as we can. So along with that, I'll start off again by saying who I am, a little bit more about my company. Keyfactor is, as Keith mentioned, a public key infrastructure company, and we provide software and tools to issue digital certificates, which are unique identities that identify endpoints and things. And we've been using PKI in the enterprise for decades. And over the past 10 or so years, we're seeing more and more adoption of certificates into IoT devices, like you see on the right side of the screen. IoT meaning anything as small as an embedded chip or a medical device to an airplane or a turbine or some sort of transportation like a train or autonomous truck. So my company really helps to make sure that we're providing the right sort of embedded security for IoT and OT environments, automating them, as well as providing a way to update them over time. When it comes to code, we also talk about how you need to sign your code, whether that's development code or production code, with specific code signing identities, and then also have a way to manage that over time so that you know who is authoring code, who is updating code, and that devices can validate that the origin of that code before they install over-the-air updates. So those are just a little bit of things that Keyfactor does with our products applied to the IoT space. So again, with that, I'm going to hand it over to the next panelists here because they are really the experts. So Alan, if you could please, we've got your slides coming up here. Just give a little bit of intro about you and kind of what your company does.
Sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Alan Tate. I'm one of the directors and chief technology officer at Pelion. We've been around for around about 25 years now, working in, well, what is now IoT, but was SCADA, M2M, telemetry, and various other use cases around mobile comms. Today, we have a global network into 600 networks, 140 countries, 1.8 million connections, and we're focused on providing M2M and IoT connectivity to a number of target verticals. So basically, if you're in the UK and Europe or North America, we can deliver a solution with very high capacity, very low latency, reliable communications in industrial, energy, retail, transportation, and healthcare. 66 of us, over 600 customers, around about 2 million connected devices out there worldwide. We deliver global IoT for enterprise and global companies looking to go into individual markets. So we're providing an end-to-end solution which contains essentially global IoT connectivity provided over EUICC, where we can personalize your solution from reliable communications down to high capacity, low latency ones in market. We provide security services to provide an overlay to your connectivity so that we can secure that from end to end, so the data leaving your device to your application server shouldn't touch public internet, can be fully managed, and we offer a managed services platform which has a number of tools built in order to be able to see, manage and control the data which is coming across our network, and that's how we're providing our XDR responses today. That's me.
Thank you very much, Alan. Okay, and then if we could hand it over to Ken.
Thanks, Ellen. Appreciate it. Hi, yeah, Ken Wells with floLIVE, VP of Technical Sales, North America. We provide the world's largest hyperlocal global network, where we develop and deploy these networks. They're carrier-grade distributed networks. We have 40 plus globally distributed POPs around the world with central management and control. We're multi-tenant. We have multi-tier as well. With inside of that, we use multiple networks through a multi-MZ structure, and we're globally consistent with our product with these. So we build the core network ourselves and own that. So how is that helping to in the XDR security realm? In owning your own core network, it provides unmatched control and insight. We build our core elements to have visibility so that we can see what's happening going on with inside of each of these networks nodes that we're deployed across. And because of that, we can also expose that to our customers so that they can see and watch and create automated responses within their own infrastructure to detect anomalies. Since we're proactively monitoring, we have automated rules to block and isolate compromised devices at a network level. And then these are things, like I said, our customers can do additionally. We have automated types of rules for monitoring behavior of your device, so you can detect when there's an anomaly. Since we have deep network visibility, we have full control over the network traffic and behavior. So we can watch the events that are happening and take automated steps to remediate anything that we see that might be going on. With comprehensive data collection for each of these nodes, we can make analysis and decisions with AI, with ML, and have automated actions that can take event and act upon them. Real-time data access. This is immediate with our core networks deployed globally. Even our customers, you have visibility. You can see exactly what your device is doing, how it's registering, how it's connecting to the network, the data that it's sending. All of this is visible to you in real time from your connectivity management portal. You can also build automation rules around that to monitor that. As I said, it's AI ML driven. So real-time data collection and AI-based threat detection. So distributed denial of service attacks, things like this, we can isolate traffic, we can remediate, move that off to a safe zone, or just stop the device from connecting at all in an automated fashion. So we have consistency, security across all the regions. Since it's our core networks, your deployment in the US is the same as it is in Europe or Asia, wherever you're deploying your devices at. So you have a single approach to your network and looking at your devices. Also, we localize in these countries, so we're compliant with things like GDPR in these countries, and then network-based security, as I said, distributed denial of service attacks, looking at our network nodes, being able to remediate and act upon those in an automated fashions, using next-gen firewall intrusion detection, things of this nature that we do out there. And we provide connectivity for all the way down for enterprises, where we can provide you global connectivity, but we also build IoT core networks for MVNOs, even MNOs, that are looking to deploy a dedicated IoT core. Thanks for having me here, and I'm happy to be here and talk about XDR, a very important topic.
Awesome. Thank you so much, both of you, for your introductions. So with that, we're going to go and do a couple of questions that we've preset, but I will throw it out there again. If the audience has any Q&A as we go along, please put it in a chat so I will be able to take a look and ask the experts here. So again, so XDR, standing for Extended Detection and Response. From my understanding, it's really designed to be able to provide a comprehensive view that an organization can have into what the security posture is, and to be able to provide a better threat detection, threat response capabilities. And so I think I'd like to start firstly with giving the audience a little bit more of an understanding of what that definition is. And then we'll sort of get into some of the ways that people can implement this within the organization. So maybe if I could start with Ken, could you please just give us a little bit more high level about what do we think about this from a definition standpoint and the ultimate goal of it?
Sure. So thank you, Ellen. So, it's looking across multiple nodes simultaneously, right? So email, anything with inside of your network, your firewalls, any endpoints that you may have deployed into the field, where that you're bringing this information that you're gathering from these devices, whatever that may be, if it's an SNMP trap for a behavior of the device that is an anomaly, any kind of a KPI that you're monitoring at that endpoint, bringing it into a centralized solution so that you can analyze that across all of the threat vectors. So you can start building pattern mapping and things that would show you time of day types of attacks where that you're more vulnerable. So just doing a higher level of analysis on this. And where it's really relevant, and I think the aim is to just increase your security posture overall. Is to provide you that real-time visibility across all of these elements that could sometimes be isolated within your company, right? You may have a group that's looking at your network, that's looking for threat detection. You may have another group that is looking at email and trying to prevent and track malware and things of this nature. But it kind of unifies that view for the SecOps community within inside of your company to be able to say, okay, I see all of these threat vectors coming in and can correlate then some patterns that may help do advanced detection and deterrence of those types of events. In the IoT space, I think it becomes really important because of the low compute and memory of IoT endpoint sensors. There's not a lot of space and processing compute, especially if you're talking about a battery-powered device, to really take a very strong posture at the edge where the intrusion may happen. And to be able to prevent that. So you need to kind of go deeper into the network and look at stopping those types of threats that may slip past your endpoint device and start coming to your network to attack your network. So you need this visibility into the core elements and things like that. And our platform can provide that type of visibility, like I said, with automation and rules to take advantage of that. And also provide feedback into XDR systems from those in an automated fashion through automatic pushes and things of this nature that can push events to these XDR systems to help monitor these endpoints behaviors and things that may be changing.
Mm-hmm. Great. Thank you, Ken.
Sure.
Alan, do you have anything to add to that, or any different view from what you've seen, some of the projects that you've worked on and such?
Yeah, I think that the key to Ken's point, a lot of IoT devices in themselves are not particularly powerful. So we tend to see in these sort of situations that it's much more around a sort of holistic view and understanding what your devices should be doing and how they're actually connecting. From that, you can essentially build up a pattern and identify what's actually happening in the wider field. And that visibility step is really, really important to help understand, are my devices performing as I expect? And then that ability to push those traps and alerts to basically say, no, they're not. And something might have gone wrong, as well as areas that we definitely focus on, and being able to ideally tell customers very early in their journey to identify something has gone wrong, or you've introduced something into your setup that's wrong, is something that we try and do very quickly with our solutions.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. Awesome. Okay, so this is a question I'll throw it out to either of you. It's sort of a tag on to this initial one, but do you have a story that we can provide to the audience that quantifies the benefit of implementing XDR? So perhaps a case study or something that one of your companies has done to say that this has either prevented X or provided just some sort of benefit, and how do we quantify that, and why do people invest in this? So either one of you, feel free to start.
So I can jump in quickly. There's a story that I always tell about one of our customers, and we occasionally used to get this alert on our systems that says you're infected with corn flicker. if anyone remembers the old sort of Windows CE style virus that came out. And we eventually tracked this problem right down to, it was one of the field service engineers from one of our customers, that every single time a device failed, they'd go out in a USB stick and they'd flash an image of Windows CE back into this device. And it would be, the base image was actually infected. So we were able to actually very quickly tell the customer, well, every single time this engineer is going out and the pattern of devices becoming infected has to be linked to something that is part of the maintenance cycle. And they were able to actually find the engineer on the individual laptop which was infecting these remote devices that went out. But the fact that we were able to detect that and inform them means that instead of their entire estate becoming a botnet, we were able to isolate it very quickly, restrict communications, and tell them what they had to do. So in that space, they were, anything that's on a cellular network generates traffic, it generates cost. So if you're part of a botnet or you're sending data you're not expecting to, you're going to get a large bill off the back of that. And that's one of the areas where you see the commercial impact very quickly of these solutions being secured. And that's one of the areas where we've always looked to try and protect against, no inbound communication should be there, but you can't ever get rid of that human factor. And it was about being able to identify the pattern of these devices and how they were becoming infected that allowed us to basically help that customer from getting a significant, degradation in service, potentially security incident, and then a cost overrun.
Yes, that makes a ton of sense. Yeah, those costs can really add up. Great, thank you. Okay, so let's move to the next question, which is perhaps a little bit more, how does it actually work? So from a detection standpoint, how do we determine if a connection is doing the right thing? We hear these concepts of secure by design. How do we be able to detect if it's really operating the way that it should be? So Ken, maybe I'll pass it over to you to start.
Sure. So one of the ways is knowing what your device is supposed to be doing, right? So if you've designed an application, typically these IoT applications, they have a very specific purpose. They're reporting a location every 15 minutes. They're reporting a value of how much volume is within a tank every day. They're monitoring and measuring water pressure within inside of a line and reporting back an anomaly that's detected within that. So they have a pattern of behavior that that you should know when you're deploying the devices. So you monitor for anything that deviates from that, right? So you can build exception-based rules that say, if my device connects more than, say, 5 times a day, let me know about it. So that could be an intrusion point, right? If your device if it's only supposed to connect 5 times a day and suddenly it starts connecting 30 times a day, that could be a problem. You may just have a firmware issue. Your device may just be going wacky, or you may have had someone that's infiltrated that device and trying to make an attack on your network through a port that's exposed that you had no idea about, right? So we can help and look at that and look down into that. But the first line of defense is knowing that something is going wrong, right? To be able to see that and to have that in real time and to be able to take a proactive response against that. So we provide a number of tools for exception monitoring that are automated. They can be push events that push into a XDR system that can alert a security panel or someone that's operating for an anomaly detection to be able to see that and take immediate action on that. Or it may be something that you're just reviewing at a later point in time from that, depending on the severity of the breach and what may be at risk with that, from that perspective. So, secure by design is a concept of thinking about that security from end to end whenever you're putting the device out in the field and making sure that you're looking at all the elements. So, on your application, if you're running, if you have an app that's running, are you signing your certificates within the root certificate of the device? Do you have that signed? Is it secure? Are you making sure that the root of your device is not accessible? So if someone happens to, I've read stories anecdotally of these home robotic vacuum cleaners that you get in, you root the thing, and all of a sudden you've got a snooping device in someone's house with a camera that can be mobile around the house. There's these types of events that you hear about within the industry that are some of the things that happen there. So, making sure your customer understands, that they're looking at holistically. And then we'll look at the network side. We'll help you, secure that connection end to end so that we're helping protect you from a entry point after it passes your device and gets into the core network and other areas and points of entry that people could be making to your application servers, for instance. Ways to secure that.
Yeah, it's definitely a multi-layered approach, right? There's in every IoT system, there's the device and the edge thing. There's the network that it travels through and the network that it runs on and how it communicates, and then there's the cloud back end. So it's important to have a multi-layered approach to this for sure. Alan, anything that you wanted to add to that in terms from your perspective?
No, I think the anomaly detection is kind of the key thing, and we like to look at it. I would say, if your smart meter suddenly starts talking to Facebook, you've got a problem. So this is kind of the areas where it pays to kind of really understand the traffic flows and the patterns. And what we try and do is we try and detect what your device is supposed to be doing. So if your account is 95% devices that are smart meters connect once a day, and suddenly this device is no longer talking to the same application server, it's suddenly connecting much more frequently, it's starting to do weird things, that's when we kind of say, look, something's changed here. Either you've taken that device and you've changed the use case for it, in which case we've detected it, or it's been compromised in some way, and those are kind of the trigger points for really investigating it. Because to Ken's point, it could be someone's messed up a firmware, and that's perfectly valid, but you probably want to know that just when you've done it, rather than you're starting to overload an application server or something else is happening downstream, which may look like a denial of service, but it might actually be a configuration issue.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yes. Great points. Okay. All right. So the next question we're going to shift into is, okay, we've detected perhaps there was an anomaly, right? That something's gone wrong. What action do we take? And how do you decide what to do? Because, shutting everything off then that'll impact, serviceability. You'll have dissatisfied customers, that sort of thing. Is there some human interaction, or is this mostly automated and we sort of can trust that we can detect this with a maybe perhaps use of AI, like we were talking, or ML inside the network? How do you decide what to do, and then what do you do? So Ken, you want to try that? Or sorry, Alan, you want to try that?
I was just going to say, from our perspective, we take the approach of wheel and form. So we do our best to tell customers when we see something is happening. If we see it being a threat to stability or a threat to something else, we can take the action to disconnect that asset. And that's something that we don't do particularly often, but in situations where it has the risk of causing a knock-on effect to other systems, other customers, or their own, and 90% of their devices are working correctly and a small percentage aren't, we may take the action to disconnect those. But mostly there's a human in the loop from the point of making those decisions. We do offer some automation out to customers if they want to use it for excessive use or excessive change. But notionally, it's an alarm that says, this looks wrong. What do you want to do? Sometimes customers are like, oh no, it's an alarm mode. We don't want that cut off. It's a security type device. Something's happened. We're either live streaming CCTV. We're sending urgent metrics. We need back from a service situation, or we understand why that has changed. In which case, we don't want to be disconnecting that. But other times they're like, no, that's wrong. It's gone into a failure state, and we do need to do something.
Yeah, and while we can take automated actions to deter or to disconnect or remove this device, to Alan's point, I may not know that my customer is doing a firmware update on their device in the field, which normally the device reports 200 kilobytes a day because it's simply reporting a meter, a measurement from a meter. But they all of a sudden do a firmware download that's a 2 meg package that's being delivered to the device. That's going to cause a spike in data, right? I don't necessarily, I certainly, in that case, don't want to take an action of shutting them down because I've just interrupted their firmware update, and we may not coordinate that with them. Some of our larger customers we do. We're talking customers that have tens of thousands of devices deployed. We have customer experience managers that are in constant communication with our customers. We help them plan. We know when they're forecasting what their growth looks like from a devices perspective, and we can understand what they're we may help them plan for doing a firmware upgrade because there may be better times of day to do it to have more success. So Sometimes with our larger customers, we're involved with that, but we can't be with every customer, obviously, right? We can't do that and manage that for every single customer. So we don't want to just automate a normal activity. We may detect it, and we have, and we've reached out through our support channels, because with all of our customers, we set up custom support channels that we can communicate with them. So if we see anything, we have a way of reaching out to them immediately, and we say, hey, look, we're noticing that all of a sudden you have 40,000 devices connecting simultaneously when you normally have 1,000. Is there something going on that we need to know about, or is that normal? Or are you expecting this kind of behavior right now? And those are types of things that we do. So there's a human intervention there, a monitoring of a network with a network operations center to detect and then proactively reach out and say, hey, is there something that's going on that we should know about, or should we take an action here to shut this down? But we can pre-automate certain types of events. If you can see a distributed denial of service attack, you can see that at a next-gen firewall. You can see this happening, right? So yeah, you want to shut that down. Those types of things, but usage patterns are not always the best thing to automate, because your customers can do unpredictable things sometimes without notifying you, and you don't want to just shut them down for no reason.
Yeah, and the other thing is that you can be more granular on what you deny. So if you're beginning to see lots of connections coming from somewhere that you don't think is particularly useful to the solution, you can block access from those IPs or those range or those actions, and still allow it to communicate with control servers and various other things. So we can be more granular when we detect something which is happening, and then reach out to the customer and say, look, we've temporarily blocked this access. Is this something that you want? And they'll either go, yes, no, we're trying to do this, or they're actually moving it to a point where, no, thank you, we'll investigate what's going on there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, all great points, guys. Thank you. So then we do have a question here in the Q&A that I'm going to try to feed into the next question that I was going to ask anyway, which is, how do changing regulations impact behavior? Meaning, are you seeing perhaps some of the standards that Z even mentioned? And I know for my business, we're following the Cyber Resilience Act, NIS2 directive, the Cyber Trust Mark in the US. So some of these global standards, sometimes they're regional, but oftentimes they're providing guidance that I think could be used universally. And the question here is really how are you seeing these sort of regulations or standards that are popping up impacting the adoption of XDR as maybe a more preventative measure? Is that really driving people's behavior to do something here proactively?
Yeah, I can take that. So, being that we deploy globally, we have to be very aware of regulations within each market. I mean, we deploy in very restricted markets like Turkey, Brazil, other areas like EU that have required for a long period of time GDPR compliance. So we are very aware of the regulations, and we work to meet those regulations and even exceed those. I think the regulations provide a great guidance for what people should be doing, and then some enforcement capability for doing so as well. Some of these regulations for devices that are sensors and things of this nature can become burdensome for that type of a deployment to try to build in some of these things there. So the XDR and these extended detection response systems being available to help implement that security and to supplement that is very important as well. And the regulatory environment, I think, is going to continue to change as we see the threats are always changing, right? So, I mean, the things that we're seeing today and how AI is advancing, even on the threat side, is helping the threats be more successful. We have to be diligent on our side. Regulations typically follow the events, though, right? So, I mean, until you know about something, it's hard to regulate against it as to what it's going to be doing. So, things like we're talking about today, we're taking these proactive stances of detection and deterrence of these are certainly equally as important as the regulation that usually follows the type of event for doing so. But yeah, we certainly look at this and are involved with all of the regulatory authorities out there and making sure that we're in compliance with that, and helping our customers do so as well.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead. Alan, are you seeing anything there from your side?
I mean, all it is it's definitely driving our behavior in terms of how we are delivering services in these various different markets, and ensuring that people who are looking at things from a global perspective, depending on where they are, can limit some of the access they get to metrics and information which is associated with communications is kind of the key one. So yeah, following it very closely determines what we offer to customers in certain regions, but capabilities wise, it's trying to follow the best tenets of the key ones, which is the European and American ones, which are there today.
Okay, great. Okay, so there was another question that popped up in the chat that I thought was an interesting one when it comes to justifying the investment in XDR. So the question was around ROI. So how do you justify investing in spending more money into technology like this and capability like this and this sort of implementing processes when it is preventative? And I get this question a lot as well. Why should I spend time on a better security architecture and figuring out what the infrastructure should be? And then the way I answer that question is, well, what is the cost of a breach? And what are you going to have to pay? And we've done some studies at Key Factor that have quantified that. So anyway, I just wanted to see your perspective on this. How do you guys quantify when are you going to get an ROI based on what you've invested in, planning and implementing this, and then maybe a tool like you guys have been discussing? How do we justify it?
I think from our perspective, it comes down to what is your business risk. So this is kind of fresh in my mind as we were just doing our cyber insurance again. So the kind of high liability you have and being able to prove that you've got a secure solution reduces your exposure and reduces your insurance costs and reduces your risk. For us, there's actually a very key metric. If your device gets compromised and you're running on a cellular network, you can see the cost go up because data equals cost in our world. So it very much comes down to what is the risk that you're willing to take? What are you indemnified against? What are you able to actually go out there? And to your point, if you get breached, is it reputational? Is it actually someone's going to hold you to ransom? Or what else or are you going to generate large amounts of data out and denial of service that, and that's going to cause a huge bill on the mobile infrastructure? So it really comes down to your risk appetite. Now, at the end of the day, you can spend absolutely millions on security products and security things, but unless you have the basics right and the right posture, then that's where you need to really invest the money in, ensuring that the access to your systems is well secured, ensuring that your individual services have things like 2FA. A lot of the things, the most common areas that you get breached are two areas: is people and vulnerabilities. So keep on top of your patching and keep on top of your internal business processes to make sure that you don't have bad security internally, because the biggest thing that causes problems is actually, ironically, people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for floLIVE, it's reputational. It's providing a service. It's meeting the standards that we're trying to achieve within ISO certifications, with SOC certifications, things of this nature, to make sure that our network is secure, that what you're operating on isn't providing an intrusion into your network, so that we can provide a very highly secure, robust global connectivity for our customers. From our customers' perspective, what they need to look at and what they need to understand is what is the risk to them for that. You may think that you only have a water sensor that's detecting water in a tank, and that data is just not important. It doesn't matter. It's a numerical value anyway. It doesn't really represent anything. But it's not just the attack of the data. It's the attack of the network infrastructure that supports you collecting that information, right? These endpoints provide access entry into your corporate network. Depending on how you DMZ or you isolate the traffic coming from these IoT devices from the rest of your network, at some point, you may not even know there's a vulnerability within your network, but if someone gains access through one of these endpoints, through an open port or an open access gateway into your core network, they can then, plant malware, they can do malicious attacks, they can deny service. There's a number of things that they can do that could harm you, other than just the data of a water meter read from a tank sitting out 1,000 miles from anybody. So it's really understanding what your risk is internally. If someone were to breach that network, how far in get, and what kind of damage would that cause you if it did.
Mm-hmm. Very helpful. Thank you, guys. I appreciate the insights on that. So the next question that I want to ask is about AI. So we have mentioned it a few times here throughout the discussion, and I feel like AI it is a buzzword, but it is something that I think all of our businesses are trying to figure out. How do we leverage it? How do we use it? And how do we trust the use of that technology to make the right decision and not a wrong decision? And I remember there was I was at a conference and one person came up to me and said, well, it's great if we can try to detect anomalies or detect something that is going wrong, but what if there's an AI malware that is making very, very minute, slight adjustments to some operation of a device or something in the network, that it goes undetected, but over a period of, let's say, 6 months or 1 year, all of a sudden it's made these tiny, tiny little micro shifts, and then all of a sudden you've totally shifted the way that device is operated, and your regular systems can't detect it. Is that even a concept that you guys are thinking about, or that sort of XDR philosophy will help us be able to prevent by using AI in a good way? Does that sort of make sense? Any thoughts on AI? I know, Ken, you were mentioning, right, AI can also be, it can help us, but it's also helping the attackers. So how do we think about this in the right way?
Yeah, I mean, it's just that you've got to think that someone's going to use that technology nefariously against you, and you've got to plan for that. And so initially, I think how we're going to be using AI technology is helping us in analyzing patterns, right? To just have a faster ability to recognize a change in a pattern. So depending on how you deploy it, is it deciding for you and making decisions, or is it just providing analysis of large amounts of data? I mean, when you have, across our networks, we have millions of network devices deployed with, billions of signaling events that are happening within our networks daily. I mean, this is just the amount of data that is coming through just to be analyzed is significant. And to be able to detect a slight pattern or a pattern detection in there, I think that's where AI is going to be most useful initially for doing this. Not so much decision making, but identification of these types of events that are happening. So I think we all have to be cautious with it in our own lives of how we're deploying AI and within our networks corporately as we're deploying them. We've got to take a responsible, proactive stance of saying, look, what am I exposing to this tool that can actually start making decisions or making changes on my behalf? And I need to monitor that, make sure that it's not something that is nefarious, for instance, that could be happening there. So I think with great caution, with great technology, there should come great caution. And, I think we should approach it in that type of a fashion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I completely agree. Ellen, any thoughts from your side on AI? Any other ways you're seeing it deployed or leveraged today?
So we've been running sort of machine learning and sort of generative AI models for about 6 or 7 years now, primarily dedicated to looking at customer trends and customer utilization. So that idea of being able to look at a customer's estate and saying these devices look as if they're doing something that doesn't match the overall pattern that we've determined for these devices. And that's everything, looking back over periods of time. So trying to catch those kind of, how is this use case morphed since day one? And we've actually got the point where we can identify devices running on different firmware versions inside of an estate doing very similar behavior, because either payload sizes would be subtly different or communications patterns would be slightly changed between them. So you can identify the ones which are performing in the sort of main cohort, and then ones which are falling outside of that. And then that's the information that we can use to say, well, okay, these devices don't look as if they're performing correctly, or something's happened where they've been left behind on older versions or older setups. So that's something that we've been refining, just mostly for our own ability to support our customers, but it's something that we're beginning to look at. How do we push out into the much more automated world to be able to say, right, now that we've got a good understanding of what these devices are, and you can detect device types and manufacturers across different types of customers and different types of applications, we can now begin to say, well, we're beginning to see problems with quick tell devices, because we can see firmware updates have changed and changed behavior. So that's kind of the space that we are really looking at this from, because we can begin to see those commonalities across all those devices which are out there. And then if they're a machine pattern or a human-driven pattern, and then any changes to that is where we're beginning to get it to automatically flag up and say, right, this is a problem. And that's kind of, it's taken us a while. We were kind of playing with generative AI and machine learning before it was cool, but it's definitely a lot of interesting stuff that's going on in that market now. Now it's kind of exploded out there. We're looking at such generative AI, ChatGPT stuff for answering support questions, being able to come up to speed with documentation quicker and all of that as well. But the really interesting bitty stuff is in actually generating a full model of a customer's account and then being able to test what happens in certain scenarios.
Makes a ton of sense. I know there's a lot of people were in AI before it was AI, right? Or in IoT before it was IoT. And I think there's a lot of benefits to this. It's just, I think we also have to be thinking about using it in the right way. And I know from my perspective, it's how do you trust the origin of all of these things? It's back to the originator, and then things will get modified over time, but is it modified by someone who's allowed to modify it and that sort of thing? Yeah. Okay, cool. So we're really getting close to time here. So one other question that kind of came up in here was around who's responsible when a IoT breach occurs, because there are multiple parties here. So let's say someone manufactures a device, so they're responsible for original device security, firmware security, all those sorts of things we talked about. But then there's also the network provider. Or then there's the operator, or whoever buys that device and then runs it or uses it within their system. And how do you determine this? So this is a really great question. I do come across it a lot because when it comes to these things, they can be expensive. If the cost of a breach could be $500,000 to $1 million euros, that's something without it. There's many times cybersecurity insurance to help cover these things. But in any way, you get into these finger pointing. Well, you should have secured your device better as a manufacturer, or you should have operated, had your network security stronger. So how do you guys think about? Do you have perspectives on this problem, and how do we typically address them? Anybody have thoughts? I'll just throw it out there.
So for me, it's about defense in depth. So you've got to assume that every single solution out there has problems. So the device might have a vulnerability. You might have access to a network and someone's not secure. Someone's not secured their IoT network away from their corporate network. There may be a vulnerability in a server somewhere running through it, and somewhere in the stack, someone might be able to gain access and leverage that in a way. The only way to protect against that is defense in depth, is to essentially assume that you are running on a essentially zero trust architecture at that point, and looking at how you then secure your own application information, access into your systems, and access with the provider. So if I'm buying an IoT device from someone and I'm putting it out on the public internet, I'm going to assume it's probably going to be compromised inside about 15 minutes, because they don't have the security around them in order to be robust and out there. And the same way, I'm not going to open up my entire network to some network provider to give access for that device to sit inside it. Same as in having that on a public IP address with direct access into your core internet. You're asking for that to be compromised. However, if you're able to have that on a private network, if you're able to have that segmented away from your public infrastructure, if you're understanding that you're only gaining access to that device from known locations, then you can reduce your risk profile right down to a point where it's an acceptable risk. And that's where defense in depth comes down. Essentially, who's responsible for it? At the end of the day, it's probably the person who put there and configured it. They're the one that are responsible. Who's going to take accountability? That's for the insurance companies to decide at the end of the day. Effectively, you've always got to assume that the asset you're putting out there can be compromised in some way, and then protect each layer going back into your core infrastructure, so that your actual business processes, the things that can cause problems, they need to be segmented as far away from if you're buying a small device out in the field and putting it out there. And then you've got to have vigorous patch cycles. You've got to be able to make sure you can update those devices, and you've got to be able to make sure you can secure the data coming off of those. That's the key important things for us.
That is great advice. Also, to kind of help wrap us up here. Thank you, Alan. Ken, any thoughts from you on that, or maybe even a wrap up thought from you? That would be great.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think what Alan says spot on. You've got to take a collective approach to this. You can't just look at one area. You've got to, understand what your risk is, and then take all the actions that you can to mitigate that risk. Privatizing, securing the data, securing the device, working with partners that can help you evaluate your device if it's a significant risk to you. Financial institutions, banking institutions, these devices that they're putting for backups for their financial transactions. These devices need, very rigorous intrusion detection at the device level to make sure. And then if it's just a water meter or something like that, maybe not so much at the device, but make sure your edge is secure, the data is secure, the pathway into your core network is secure, things like this. And we can help with all of these things, partnering with our customers. And then we have other people that we partner with in the industry to help our customers understand what their own threat risk is. Even maybe they need to go out and have a threat assessment done of their own and make sure that there's no intrusions that have been missed at any place to be able to take that. But partnering with them, helping them understand that, doing webinars like this, helping educate our customers. I think all of these things are very important, and that I'm happy that we're a part of this and could share this with the audience today, and answer any questions they might have, that they can respond to us offline or send us an email and let us know.
Yes, thank you, Ken. So again, thanks for I see there are more questions that have popped up. Thanks, audience, for being very engaged. I love that. We'll get to these later as well. So with that, thank you, Alan, CTO of Pelion, Ken, VP of Technical Sales at floLIVE. With that, I want to wrap up this session. I appreciate your expertise. I definitely learned a lot. So thank you both.
Thank you, Alan.
Thanks.
So moving on here, we do have the next IMC session coming up. It is a panel on SBOM, and there are links in the handouts, or go to the IMC website so that you can access that, and hope you can join us here starting right now, 11 a.m. Eastern. Thank you.